Good evening. Tonight, we take you inside Beijing, where history, politics, and military power converged in a spectacle the world will not soon forget. On the vast expanse of Tiananmen Square, under the red banners and the watchful gaze of President Xi Jinping, the People's Republic of China staged a parade unlike any seen in decades. The official purpose, to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. But make no mistake, this was about the future as much as it was about the past. The images were striking. President Xi standing shoulder to shoulder with Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korea's leader Kim Jong Un, the three men walking together in lockstep before the parade began. It was a deliberate tableau, an unmistakable symbol for Washington and Western capitals. This was more than a march of soldiers and hardware. This was a show of alliance, a message to the United States, to Europe, and to the world. A new order is taking shape. From the very first cannon blast to the final flight of doves and balloons released into the Beijing sky, the precision was breathtaking. 50,000 invited guests watched as ranks of troops goose-stepped in perfect unison, their boots striking the pavement in thunderous rhythm. The choir sang in carefully arranged rows, each note timed like clockwork. This was a display not only of power, but of discipline, of order, of control. And then the weapons arrived. China unveiled missiles the world had not seen before. The DF-5C, a formidable intercontinental ballistic missile. The DF-26D, a road mobile weapon designed for long-range precision, and the DF-61, a new solid-fuel missile, the latest addition to China's expanding nuclear arsenal. Military analysts noted a new wave of hypersonic warheads, weapons that move faster than 5 times the speed of sound, designed to pierce through even the most advanced defenses. Why now? Experts say Beijing is determined to strengthen its deterrence, to counter the unmatched reach of the United States Navy, whose fleet of aircraft carriers and strike groups remain unrivaled. In Washington, there has long been debate over whether those carriers, symbols of American power, are becoming vulnerable, sitting ducks to modern missile systems. Beijing clearly believes the answer is yes. With each new missile, each new platform, it is signaling that it intends to ensure a second strike capability, the ability to respond even if attacked first. But there was more on display than rockets and warheads. For the first time, China rolled out laser weapons, robotic wolves, and entire formations from new branches of its armed forces, the Aerospace Force, the Cyberspace Force, and the Information Support Force. Analysts say this shows the People's Liberation Army is being rewired for the information age. Warfare, in Beijing's eyes, will be fought not just in the air and at sea, but in cyberspace, in outer space, and across the data streams that connect the modern world. Still, questions remain. China's military may now produce an astonishing diversity of weapons. Just 10 years ago, much of its arsenal was considered little more than copies of American designs. Today, drones, hypersonic missiles, and robotic machines are being churned out in staggering quantities. But does China have the experience, the organizational agility, to use them effectively in war? Experts caution that the size of China's military and its lack of recent battlefield history may make integration of these systems a daunting challenge. The dazzling hardware may look impressive on parade, but war is not fought in parade formations. And then there was the political theater. Kim Jong Un, arriving in Beijing on his signature green armored train, walking into Tiananmen Square beside Xi and Putin. A rare sight, the reclusive North Korean leader rarely leaves his country, and when he does, it is usually for tightly controlled one-on-one summits. To see him elevated to the world stage, treated as an equal to Xi and Putin, was remarkable. He was joined by his sister, Kim Yo-jong, now one of the most visible and fiery figures in North Korea's ruling elite, and by his young daughter, Kim Ju AI, whom South Korea's intelligence service believes may be his most likely successor, their presence was symbolic. North Korea was not just represented by a leader, but by a family, a dynasty. Behind the parade's spectacle, diplomacy was at work. Putin and Kim prepared for a bilateral meeting at Beijing's Diaoyutai State Guesthouse, a site reserved for the most important foreign leaders. Xi Jinping hosted a grand reception. The menu itself made headlines: roasted lamb chops, lobster stir, fried with crab, scallop consommé, and wine from Hebei's Great Wall vineyards. The message was clear. China is not merely showcasing weapons, it is showcasing its hospitality, its culture, its leadership. But perhaps the most powerful moment came in Xi Jinping's words. Speaking to the assembled leaders, he declared that the world must never return to the law of the jungle, where the strong prey on the weak. He urged nations to draw lessons from history, to value peace, to work together for the prosperity of all humankind. And then, in a pointed reminder, he added, "Strength may prevail for a time, but over the long arc of history, it is reason that wins." Justice, light, and progress, he said, will always triumph over darkness and aggression. To many in the West, these words rang hollow, especially given Beijing's territorial ambitions and its vow to one day bring Taiwan under its control. But to China's allies, they reinforced the image of Xi as a global statesman, offering an alternative to what Beijing sees as America's heavy-handed dominance. And that may be the real story here. For decades, America has been the world's central power, its military unrivaled, its alliances spanning continents. But tonight, in Beijing, three leaders stood together, Xi, Putin, Kim, and declared in effect that the world no longer has to revolve around Washington. They spoke not in open defiance, but in imagery, in pageantry, in the silent language of military might and political unity. It was a message heard loud and clear across the globe. From Washington to Brussels, from Seoul to Tokyo, leaders are already parsing what it means. Is this the beginning of a new world order? Or is it, as some analysts warn, simply deterrence theater, a performance meant to project strength while masking fragility? Tonight, the questions remain. But the images of missiles rolling through Beijing, of robotic wolves trotting across Tiananmen Square, of three leaders smiling together before the cameras, those images will not fade. They tell us something profound about where China sees itself, about the alliances that are forming, and about the challenges that lie ahead for the United States and its allies. This was not just a parade, this was a statement about history, a statement about power, and above all, a statement about the future. Under the glaring spotlight of Beijing's meticulously choreographed parade, one of the most striking messages was not the spectacle itself, but the arsenal unveiled before the world. The emergence of weapons like the DF-5C intercontinental ballistic missile, the DF-26D long-range precision system, and the DF-61 solid fuel missile, alongside a range of hypersonic warheads, underscores a dramatic shift in China's military doctrine. For decades, China's strategy leaned heavily on sheer numbers and ground forces, but the unveiling of these advanced platforms signals Beijing's determination to move toward quality, speed, and survivability. Hypersonic missiles, traveling at more than 5 times the speed of sound, represent a particular concern for Western analysts, as they can bypass traditional defense systems and render expensive naval strike groups vulnerable. Experts note that this development is not merely about new technology, it is about deterrence. Alexander Neal, a defense analyst with the Pacific Forum, argues that Beijing is seeking not only a credible first strike force but also a secure second strike capability. This ensures that even if China were attacked, it could respond decisively, a cornerstone of nuclear deterrence. The symbolism of this cannot be overstated. By rapidly diversifying its missile platforms, China is challenging the perception that the United States holds unquestioned superiority in global military reach, and while Washington's aircraft carriers have long been floating symbols of American dominance, their role is now being questioned. Analysts point out that they risk becoming highly visible targets, what some call sitting ducks, for precisely the kind of missile forces China is building. But there is a dual narrative here. On one hand, China's military research and development has evolved at an astonishing pace. A decade ago, much of its equipment was dismissed as second-rate crude replicas of American or Russian designs. Today, the parade showcased indigenous innovation, laser weapons, autonomous drones, and robotic wolves intended for reconnaissance and battlefield support. China's centralized, top-down system allows it to mobilize vast resources quickly, enabling mass production on a scale most Western democracies cannot match. On the other hand, serious doubts persist about China's capacity to integrate these systems effectively. Military modernization is not only about hardware, it is about training, doctrine, and combat experience. Unlike the United States, whose forces have fought in conflicts from the Middle East to the Balkans, China's People's Liberation Army lacks contemporary battlefield exposure. That absence of lived combat, combined with internal challenges like corruption within the rocket force and repeated political purges, raises questions about whether Beijing's military machine is as cohesive as it appears. What unfolded in Tiananmen Square was therefore both impressive and cautionary. The world saw a nation showcasing its technological leap forward, sending an unmistakable signal to rivals. Yet beneath the polished surface, uncertainties remain about how agile, adaptive, and truly battle-ready China's forces are. It was deterrence on display, a performance designed to reassure allies, intimidate adversaries, and convince the global audience that China's rise in military power is not a future possibility, it is already here. The images of Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, and Kim Jong Un walking side by side before the world's cameras carried as much weight as the missiles that thundered through Tiananmen Square. This was political theater at its most deliberate, designed to communicate what words could not. For the first time, the leaders of China, Russia, and North Korea appeared together in a public setting, presenting themselves not as isolated figures facing sanctions and pressure, but as partners. In defiance, in a moment of carefully choreographed symbolism, they stood together as though announcing to the West, "You are not the only ones writing the rules of the global order." The timing could not be more pointed, with Washington promoting its America First agenda and European capitals preoccupied with economic uncertainty. Beijing seized the opportunity to project itself as the gravitational center of a new power alignment. The optics mattered as much as the hardware. Putin, battered by sanctions over the war in Ukraine, gains a powerful stage on which he is not an outcast, but a guest of honor. For Kim Jong Un, long treated as a pariah who rarely steps outside his fortified borders, this was nothing less than an elevation. Walking alongside Xi and Putin placed him on equal footing with two of the world's most consequential leaders. His daughter, Kim Jong Un, and his sister, Kim Yo-jong, also in attendance, added layers of symbolism suggesting dynastic continuity and the strength of North Korea's ruling family. This was not just one man's appearance, but the presentation of a lineage prepared to stand beside two nuclear powers. For Xi Jinping, the event was an opportunity to anchor his leadership firmly at the center of a shifting global stage. By bringing together Putin and Kim, Xi highlighted China's growing role as a convener of alternative alliances. The parade was followed by quiet preparations for a bilateral meeting between Putin and Kim, hosted at the Daeoyutai State Guesthouse, the residence reserved for state leaders of the highest importance. Xi positioned China not only as the host, but as the hub of this emerging axis. In Western capitals, the images sent shivers, three leaders, each in his own way isolated or sanctioned, now forming what analysts describe as a counterweight to American hegemony. The display was not without its complexities. These nations do not share identical goals. Russia seeks relief from international isolation. China wants to challenge the West without jeopardizing its economic foundations, and North Korea seeks legitimacy and protection. Yet for this moment, the differences mattered less than the optics of unity. A headline in Russia's Komsomolskaya Pravda captured the sentiment, "We will build a new world." To many observers, this parade was a rehearsal for that ambition. What the world witnessed was not simply military strength, but a symbolic declaration of alignment. It was a reminder that geopolitics is shaped as much by who stands together in public as by what is said behind closed doors. In that sense, the true power of the parade lay not only in the missiles that rolled across Beijing, but in the unmistakable image of three leaders daring the West to pay attention. What played out in Beijing was more than a parade. It was a statement of intent, and the reverberations are being felt far beyond Tiananmen Square. For the United States and its allies, the display of military might combined with the imagery of political solidarity raises urgent questions about the balance of power in the 21st century. At its heart lies a strategic competition that is growing sharper by the day, the rivalry between China and the United States. Washington has long relied on its unmatched naval dominance, a network of alliances stretching from Europe to Asia, and a reputation as the guarantor of global stability. But Beijing is signaling that it intends to rewrite that story. With each new missile unveiled, each new cyber or space command formation marching in step, China is showing that it wants to be more than a regional power. It wants to be the peer competitor. America, the implications are profound. Analysts note that the unveiling of hypersonic missiles and robotic systems does not only serve the purpose of deterrence, it also forces adversaries to rethink their strategies and defense budgets. Every new Chinese weapon that can threaten an aircraft carrier or evade missile defenses pushes the Pentagon to invest billions more in countermeasures, stretching resources and accelerating an arms race. In Washington, policymakers worry that the United States risks being caught off balance, defending not only its presence in Asia, but also its global commitments from Eastern Europe to the Middle East. China, by contrast, concentrates its resources closer to home, particularly across the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea, where its ambitions are clearest. But the competition is not purely military. At the lunch reception following the parade, Xi Jinping spoke of building a brighter future for humanity, of rejecting the law of the jungle, where the strong prey on the weak. While Western leaders may dismiss these words as rhetoric, the language resonates in parts of the world weary of American dominance. From Africa to Latin America, Beijing presents itself as an alternative partner, one that offers infrastructure, trade, and now a vision of collective security, even if that vision comes with strings attached. The optics of Putin and Kim standing beside Xi reinforce that message. China can deliver partnerships others cannot, bridging leaders who the West has tried to isolate. Still, the parade also revealed the fragility behind the spectacle. For all its technological strides, China's armed forces remain untested in modern conflict. Corruption scandals and internal purges within the rocket force highlight weaknesses that military hardware cannot conceal. And while the display projects confidence, it also betrays anxiety. Beijing knows that it still lags far behind Washington and Moscow in nuclear stockpiles, and it fears encirclement by American alliances from Japan to Australia. The message of strength, then, is as much for domestic reassurance as it is for foreign rivals. Ultimately, the parade underscores a shifting reality. The world is moving toward multipolarity, with China eager to take its place as a central pillar. For the United States, this is a challenge unlike any it has faced since the Cold War, a contest not just of weapons, but of systems, of ideologies, and of global influence. The missiles and robotic wolves may capture headlines, but the deeper battle is for the narrative of the 21st century, and Beijing has made it clear it intends to write its own chapter. Beneath the glittering spectacle of Beijing's military parade lies a more complex reality, one that underscores both China's extraordinary rise and the vulnerabilities that still haunt it. The unveiling of advanced weapons, from intercontinental ballistic missiles to robotic wolves, creates the impression of unstoppable momentum. Yet analysts warn that the rapid pace of modernization masks profound structural weaknesses. The People's Liberation Army, despite its size and technology, lacks combat experience in modern warfare. Unlike the United States, which has fought in multiple theaters over the last 3 decades, China has not tested its forces in real high-tempo operations since its brief clash with Vietnam in late 1970s. That absence of lived experience raises questions about whether the parade's polished formations could perform with the same precision in the chaos of battle. Corruption and political purges add another layer of fragility. The rocket force, entrusted with China's most sophisticated missile systems, has been rocked by scandals and abrupt leadership reshuffles. These episodes reveal not just corruption, but also mistrust within the ranks. Centralized command may appear impressive in peacetime, with Xi Jinping able to push sweeping reforms and integrate cyber, space, and information warfare into the PLA structure. Yet that same centralization can become a weakness in wartime, when flexibility and initiative are vital. The rigidity of a top-down system risks brittleness under pressure. As one analyst observed, deterrence theater is powerful for intimidation, but it is not the same as combat readiness. China's strategic ambitions also come with risks. Its vow to one day reunify Taiwan, by force if necessary, is a looming flashpoint. While the parade reassures domestic audiences that Beijing is preparing for any scenario, it also highlights how central Taiwan has become in China's military calculus. But here lies the paradox. The very show of strength intended to deter may harden opposition in Taipei, strengthen American commitments, and draw regional powers like Japan and Australia into closer security ties. In that sense, every missile on display is both a symbol of confidence and a reminder of the dangers of escalation. Beyond military issues, there is the broader question of China's long-term trajectory. The parade projected unity, with soldiers pledging loyalty and leaders presenting a front of political cohesion. Yet internally, the Chinese Communist Party faces challenges from slowing economic growth to discontent among its youth. Nationalism, fueled by spectacles like this, can serve as a powerful glue, but it can also be volatile if expectations are not met. Xi Jinping is positioning himself as the architect of a new world order, one that rejects Western dominance. But to maintain credibility abroad, China must prove that its military is more than pageantry and its governance more than slogans. The ending moments of the parade, the release of doves, the soaring of balloons, the crowd erupting in applause, were designed to close on a note of triumph. But for the world watching, the conclusion was more complicated. The weapons were real, the alliances visible, yet so too were the uncertainties. China's rise is undeniable, its ambitions clear, but whether it can sustain this trajectory without stumbling under its own weight is a question that will shape the century ahead. And so, as the last echoes of goose-stepping soldiers faded from Tiananmen Square, one truth remained: this was not just a commemoration of history, but a rehearsal for the battles, political, economic, and perhaps military, that lie ahead. The stage has been set, the players have taken their positions, and the world now waits for the next act.